Are you saying there's nothing at Hillsborough?
Hillsborough is not a good inlet for catching pilchards or herring, but they do have a very good bait boat there, but I can't remember the name of it right now, and it wouldn't come to me this afternoon either. But
I'm trying to get away from the bait boat.
Shameless, yes, thank you. Shameless is usually selling bait there, and he's usually close to the fish city. So, but Hillsborough is a very tough place to catch pilchards or herring. We're going to get into baits that you can catch at Hillsborough in a little bit, but let me finish up on the pilchards and herring first. So you go to one of those locations I mentioned again, Jupiter Inlet on the outside of the inlet, Boca in the inlet, preferably on the slack tide. Port Everglades, you go southeast of the inlet out to the anchor balls. Haulover cut, frequently you'll catch your pilchards in the bay, on the grass flats, and there you anchor up and chum, and you'll know where to fish by the pelicans diving. And if you're good with a cast net, that's a very good place to cast net them. And then government cut is usually, in the wintertime, is in the cut, hopefully not down by the cruise ships. But as the tide is going out, the bait gets closer to the end of the inlet, the jetties, and as the tide comes in, the bait goes further and further in towards downtown Miami. And then if you get even further south, down at the south end of Key Biscayne, then you go to a place called Bug Light most of the time, and you'll find the herring on the upstream side of the marker, and the pilchards are allowed to be out on the grass flats or directly under the marker. But you get to those places, you sabiki the herring and the pilchards, and you can usually accumulate a good mess of bait. If you're looking for the bait on your depth finder, as a general rule, the pilchards will mark from the bottom up. It'll be a hill coming up off the bottom. Sometimes you won't even be able to mark a gap between, it'll actually look like the bottom just came up in a relatively rounded hill. Herring, on the other hand, are usually up near the surface, and you'll mark them anywhere from just a few little blips up to a solid cloud, but again, usually 10 or 15 feet below the surface. And if you're out into 10 feet of water, then you might mark them only 3 feet below the surface. But they'll be up near the surface, and on real calm days, they'll often be swimming around with their heads sticking out of the water, so that they can be relatively identified at those times. So that, if you just had pilchards and herring, you could catch almost everything you wanted to in South Florida. The reason that you fish at the anchor balls in Port Everglades is that at night, pilchards go out to sea to feed. And as it starts to get light, and they get very spread out, by the way, as it starts to get light, the pilchards gather up into tight schools and they go into shore. Into shallow grass flats where the pelicans can't identify them because of the brown bottom of the grass flat, into the inlets, in around the jetties, places like that. In Port Everglades, a lot of times they go in around on the backside of the cruise ships where you're not allowed to go with your boat. A lot of times Port Everglades could be full of pilchards and you can't go to where they are. Interestingly enough, Port Everglades used to have a very good herring population, and for some reason, the last few years, they've been much harder to find there. But as a general rule, herring are more common at deep water inlets, and pilchards are more prevalent at shallow water inlets. So Port Everglades is an oddball situation in that they did have a good herring population, but from what I've heard the last few years, it's been pretty hard to get them there. But the fact of the matter is that every year it seems like it's harder and harder to catch bait north of Government Cut in the wintertime. And I just thank my lucky stars that I'm at Government Cut. Yes, sir?
You mentioned when the tide goes in Government Cut and the bait fish are further in. Are you talking about the main channel where the cruise ships are, or the fisherman's channel south of that?
The main population in the wintertime is usually in the main ship channel. But if they're not in the main ship channel, then Fisherman's Channel quite often does have both pilchards and herring in it, and it's well worth checking. But if you were going to Government Cut and you'd never been there, there's an intersection that looks kind of like my arm. This is the inlet going out to the ocean. This channel, let me think now, I got to get this turned around so we got it right for you. This channel here goes past Miami Beach Marina underneath the bridge, and underneath that bridge sometimes you'll find it's shallower water on this channel. But this channel here underneath the bridge, sometimes you'll find small pilchards and stuff. This is the main ship channel. There's a lot of times that you can't go any further than to where it narrows down to one channel because of the cruise ships down in the port. But generally speaking, just into this channel, there's a ferry boat dock that comes from Fisher Island, and you can go as far as that ferry boat dock, and you're allowed to find pilchards and herring anywhere from one shoreline to the other. Just most of the time you'll see birds diving or the other boats working. And then if there was a best place in Government Cut, right here on the edge of this channel, right where there's a marker to go to this channel, there's a shallow bar here that goes to shore that you don't want to get up onto most often, but right around this green marker number 19 is ground zero most days for catching threadfin herring. They might be slightly west of it, they might be slightly east of it or south of it, but they're going to be in the deep water around that marker. And then the channel that that gentleman was asking about is this south channel, and that goes around to the freighters and the cranes and goes all the way to the Miami River. And quite often on the tide lines in there, you'll find pilchards and herring if you haven't found them over by the pilot station. So, yes, sir?
Bear Cut. Anything around Bear Cut?
Bear Cut was really good a few years ago, but it's been pretty lean the last couple of years. But the Bear Cut Bridge quite often, especially has smaller pilchards around it. But like I say, the last couple of years has been a little lean over there. So it's been, yes, sir?
Palm Beach County, Boynton Inlet, Lake Worth, anything up in that area strike your fancy?
Most of the time, those areas are coming to Miami to catch their bait all winter long. And I really don't fish that area. It's not my area of expertise. The farthest north I know to consistently catch bait is Boca, and that's usually in the channel between the drawbridge and the turn where it heads back out to the east. At Boynton Inlet, there used to be a little rock pile northeast of the inlet that had a lot of cigar minnows and stuff on it. Yes, sir?
Jesus Creek area, Ocean Reef area.
Again, you're beyond my normal realm, but a lot of times over by Pumpkin Key, you'll find pilchards up on the flat. And when you're down that end of the bay, almost always your pilchards are going to be found in the bay. And the best thing you can do first thing in the morning when you're leaving whatever channel you're leaving from before you head across the bay or as you work your way across the bay is to use binoculars. And if you find 2 or 3 terns or a pelican in an area, they'll usually find out there's a school of pilchards there. And it can be real good down there. It's just that there's so much area that you're allowed to find them. And like I said, I don't fish down there enough to be an expert on it. But I do know that they usually find them under terns or pelicans down there.